And we're live. Thank you so much for joining us for part two. This is your Omiika 7 and tribe. I must remember to say tribe because the ancestors are with me. And this is Omi's production studio. Thank you so much for joining my channel. Don't forget to subscribe down at the bottom and be one of my followers. And also put your comments down. We're going to go into a series of dealing with Ifa, and this particular segment will be on can divination assist us in court cases? And we're going to look at how the oracles can speak to the court cases and how we can formalize our own court system amongst us sisters as we become the legal department of the judiciary system. We are going to eventually have to look at how do we turn our judicial system around. One of the things you might not know about me is I have worked in law for Motorola as one of their paralegals in the legal department, along with various different lawyers who were JD and who were also accountants. It was in the area of law, corporate law. So I am familiar somewhat with the corporate law aspects. I've also volunteered for the NAACP as one of their paralegals who did research for cases in case law, providing assistance for litigation and doing interrogatories and briefs. So I am familiar with the process of the assistant in the legal area. And I don't mind putting my hat back on to look at how our race as an African American can change our legal system and looking at cases where we can come in as paralegals and do our due diligence. Because sometimes we do pro bono work and we come in and we take cases and we assist in elder care law, we assist in litigation and research. And I find that there's no reason why we cannot formalize our own legal defense department for low income families, whether we're doing the legwork for research to prepare briefs or interviews, whether we're doing the interrogatories, whether we are actually presenting motions. We can do all of these things in the preparation, but we do not practice law. We cannot render law and giving a definition of our explanation of the law. We cannot act as members of the bar. We are not members of the bar, but we are assistants who aid. So let me get that clear. We are not talking about practicing law. We're talking about aiding and assisting the lawyers. There are a number of lawyers who do hire paralegals to come in and do the briefing work and the interviewing work of the clients and finding how to utilize the technical research that is available, like the Westlaw, to gather all the case law. So let's get into it. We're talking about turning our system around. We're a little fed up now with how we see the courtroom being ran like a zoo, like a hideous entertainment, like a rabbit race, and running people down into rabbit holes. And it's time for Black people to stand up. And may you say that I am the first priestess that came forward that talked about revealing our magic in the courtroom so that we can look into the oracles to determine who's lying and who is not, and determine how can we substantiate one's testimony. And all of the Yoruba teaching in this area of law, Jehuti and Mayat, they are judges in the arena of the Kemetic faith, and they're used repetitiously to give information as to who's lying and who is not. As we look into the Cosmic record, we can find those who are being truthful or who are lying, and we can rule them out. This tool can be used very significantly to aid and assist in the courtroom in determining cases and finding out who is telling the truth. And should this baby be divided amongst the two of them, or should we find out who is the rightful owner of this child? So it's very vital that we use our Yoruba faith and teachings in the courtroom. Can divination be used appropriately in the courtroom to decipher lies and truths and find out whose eyes are in the eyes of the beholder and is truth in their eyes? I believe we can, because Yoruba is set up in a strategic way that a reading can be done to determine a yes or no answer. And we don't have to rely on people coming to the courtroom to deface themselves. We can hold our own courtrooms in our own community, and we can handle our own victims and the defendants in the courtroom in our own community. And they must allow those women who have the ability to see into the lives of others. This is a gift that we have, and we want to share it with the community under pro bono. And as a paralegal, who've been a paralegal for many, many years, who worked on cases with Motorola, who worked on cases with NAACP. As a matter of fact, I was named the Woman of the Year for volunteering under pro bono for NAACP to do cases for gentlemen that were in prison, to help to do the research for those cases. So I'd have to brush up on my skill a little bit. I've been away from dealing with law. I do educational law for special education. That is my specialty now. So I am up to date on the specialty area of educational law, and have written and have done video recordings, TV radio shows for educational law. And I am familiar with the 94-142, the Ideal Law, also 504, and the 457 law for early intervention. So my area is heavily inundated with educational law for special ed. And I am in the process of producing materials that you can purchase in that area to help set up your parent information center, and to also become an advocate for special education law. So let's get into it. So how might we be able to use the tools of Yoruba of divination? First of all, we must have trained priests and priestesses and Inyala who have the skills of becoming a diviner, someone that can use the divining chains, who can ask the question and manipulate the divining chains to be able to get a yes or no answer. Someone who could also have a medium and manipulate the cards. If they're using the Kemetic cards, if they're using I Ching cards, and if they are doing the Yoruba divination of the I Kings, where they are reading the I Kings and doing the divination with also knowing how to read the 256 Odus. Now, one of the things that I would say is that it would be very important, because of the commitment time spent on Ifa divination and the in-depthness. I would like to recommend the Art to Divination because it's a little simpler and easier to decipher after you've chosen your selected divination medium. And it could easily be taught to those priestesses so they can get quite familiar with a variety of ways to do readings, and that way they can use several readings to see if they can compare and getting the same answer. And why do you think it's necessary to have the divination oracles in a courtroom? Because sometimes you have to make quick decision who's lying, who isn't. And the jury needs to be able to go back and have a divination done so they can collectively come up with some decision. And divinations are something that are given to traditional tribes, where they have to study for many, many years to learn. But they have come up with the shorter version of those particular one, using mediums that have a spirit. See, it's the medium that you're using and that you're speaking into. The spirit never lies. The medium itself takes on the spirit, and some people are able to do divinations without a medium. They're able to look at oracles and look at the oracle or the aura around the person and be able to see if the body radiates with certain colors, and if there's an aura around that person when a question is being asked, have they been able to correctly answer that question? Are they lying? And does their body motion give way to them lying? And most people who are seers see in the spirit. A lot of times people see me closing my eyes when I'm talking, and I'm going into the spirit a lot. The spirit takes me away and reveals things to me. And the spirit is eternal. We must know that. But looking at the natural, it's temporal. And we want to be able to be involved in the spirit. Now, if this were to go into the courtroom, I can see it being used as a tool in the jury. I can see it being used as a tool to work with the judge. We are now formalizing programs right now as I speak in the area of co-parenting that works directly with the judge. Now, the judge does not have expertise in every area, only in law. But when it comes to working with families, we have found a way to bring our modalities into the courtroom for family life. And as a family life specialist and working with families and also doing court work with families, we have found that the judge needs to be brought up to date and they need to be familiarized with best practices for the science of child development, because they have found that judges have done more detrimental things to the family law court system by placing children on hold and placing them into temporary homes, which could further do damage to the child. If the judge doesn't know the best practices for the infant and toddler, then there is a specialist that comes on board that briefs the judge on the best practices for that infant and toddler and gives him some insight into the necessity and needs for that child so that he can make a better decision to briefly move the child through the system so that the child is not in the system any more than 2 months. And that is a practice under the early intervention, under the court law for infants who have been abused. And one of the areas that we work on is getting that judge familiar with the needs of that child. And if that child needs to go into therapy while that child is in holding, we recommend the child go into therapy so that the child doesn't have withdrawals and go into a terrible, terrible situation of shutting down and discontinuing to eat or to talk, because the child's initial problems need to be addressed while still in the hands of the courtroom. He cannot be neglected, or she cannot be neglected, because baby can't wait. You must immediately begin to administer some therapy for that child and have the child in the system no longer than 2 months and have him move on. Or else the judge can be spoken to and the judge has to be brought up to date as to what are the best practice for that infant so he's not further destroyed or further put into distress while he's in the holding pattern waiting to return back home to his parents. Sometimes those children don't ever go back home. Can you imagine? That is a withdrawal for that child, and the judge must know the best practices are for handling that child to prevent that child from going into regression. Now, in the courtroom of a family law, I can see the Yoruba faith and divination being utilized appropriately, and in the case of criminal law as well. But how do we bring divination into the courtroom? What's the best way to spearhead it and introduce it? As professionals, as those people who hold master's degrees, we're professionals in our area of study. I am a professional with a master's degree. I could very well write a brief to the judge to explain to the judge that it's time to allow the African Americans to have a presence in the courtroom. At least you would give some hope to the young defendant and the perpetrator so that there is a practice of giving all men the ability to tap into having justice prevail on behalf of them. And to see an African American there would give that young first time assailant hope that they can receive justice in the courtroom. Now we must go into the real point of this and say we must be allowed to use our traditional customs such as prayer, pouring libation, bringing the spirit there. So the spirit will determine the outcome, and it won't just be us speaking heads, but the spirit will be present there and will show up. And if need be, bring about the spirit in a bembe. And also making sure the judge knows that this is no strike against him, but just one to bring about truth and justice, and the Constitution will prevail on behalf of every individual there, and their rights will be given and their testimonies will be heard, and any person would not get railroaded because everyone would have a chance. And we begin to look into the Cossack records to get the answers to these questions that are unknown. And the judge won't have to speculate, he won't have to suggest, and he will be able to get the opinion of the oracle and diviners' outcome of their reading. And this would play a great part in collecting data and information. And you would have not just only forensic readings, but you would have spiritual reading to compare the testimonies to. And there you have it. Should divination be used in court cases? And how can they benefit an African American who has not seen justice in the past in the courtroom? It would give us the desire to believe that we can go to court and get justice. Because in the past, we have not been able to get justice because people have been speculating, and their speculation have not been good enough, and they have not been properly relying on testimonial evidence. They have been relying on testimony, and sometimes people will testify up under oath and lie. So, can a lie be detected under EFI? Can you determine if a person is lying? Yes, you can. You can ask yes or no questions, and EFI can reveal to you the truth. And ultimately, these particular customs and traditions can be put into our own communities, and we can have our own judicial system, and we can judge our victims and defendants in our own community in their own environment. And then justice can prevail, and the harsh punishments put on those first-time offenders can be eliminated, and we can give those second chances and give those first-time violators a chance to be rehabilitated and to be put into good standing. And that's what it's all about, to keep an organization of a community well-rounded so that justice does prevail and that we welcome justice in our community. Because there's too many harsh judgments being put upon people that are not necessary, just like the one with Bill Cosby. We want to create something out of this that's positive, out of the conviction and verdict that came out for Bill Cosby. We can create and make recommendation about using the divination practices for vindicating our clients in court and for having a more sure way of predicting who's lying and who isn't. So thank you very much. And there you have that segment. And we hope that you'll tune in again to my show entitled Omi's Production Studio. And go down below and subscribe. And don't forget to write your opinion about should oracle divination be brought in to the court cases, and how can they best help us, and try to find out a little bit more about using divinations in order to find out the oracle reading. And we thank you so much. I am your Omi Inca 7. I have been on Facebook for over 8 years and on Blog Talk for 9 years. Go out and listen to some of our Blog Talk sessions, and don't forget to become not only just a follower, not only just a member and a friend, but a follower and a subscriber. And I'm not asking you to subscribe and submit any money. Right now, we're putting things together. I do have my training materials getting ready to go out there under the category of law, educational law. For those who are looking to set up a parent information center, you need to get at me and call me, because I can assist you in setting up those family resource centers in your community and in your home. And for those that are homeschoolers, I definitely could assist you in having your own special education family resource center in your home or in your community. And I have the tools to work with now. You can see me right on video where I am laying out the instructions of educational law under the 94-142, the IDEA law, the 504, the 457 law. All of those laws you need to know about if your child is in special education. You can run a family resource center out of your home. You can provide services and material for those families who have special needs children or differentiated learners. And you can begin to set up your own parent information center if you like, or if you just like to be an advocate, you can be a surrogate advocate. And we are formalizing a surrogate advocates in the schools. When they do the actual staffings, we want to have a surrogate advocates there that are on the paid list to be paid for representing the child if a parent's absent and where a parent can't be there. But our whole intention is to bring educational law in a visible site where we can get the children in special ed appropriately placed in their right categories of specialty, so they're not all in LD and BD, but they can be in language learners area and get the remediation in language. So do give me your vote down below to tell me if you think that having divination readings in the court cases could help better our cases, and how we can utilize it in our own community. So please give me your opinion. I solicit your opinion and ask that you would definitely subscribe to my channel. There will be a newsletter coming out under the early childhood development, dealing with early intervention, and you will be able to read the newsletter. And for those special education people who have children that you have in special ed and you want to be an advocate, talk to me about how to become an advocate, how to get the surrogate training so you can advocate as an independent contractor to advocate and go to mediation and possibly due process with these parents if they need you. But I believe in making the parents the first teacher, and I believe that the parent is the first teacher. But we are talking about law right now. How do we bring law into our communities, and how do we be a part of the adjudication system? And this is one of the ways, by bringing divination into the courtroom to vindicate clients who can't decipher what's the truth. Thank you so much for joining us, and I do invite you back in to another segment of Omi's Production Studio. Thank you so very much, and do have a great day. Davo and Baba Booey to y'all.